and welcome to Step Into Your Life with Julianne Williams. I am very interested today in our guest. His name is Jerry Skolnik, and you may have seen him earlier in the series, but he has some words for us on relationships and communication. I know that many of us struggle with relationships in our life, or we just want to find a way to be a better communicator and to improve the relationships of the people that we love and that love us, because those relationships are really what give our life meaning and joy. So that's how we step into our life, by finding those ways to make our life more joyful. So I'm going to bring on Jerry, and he can talk a little bit about his book. And we're just going to have a conversation about relationships and some ways that we can all do better. Well, Jerry, thank you for joining us.
Very glad to. How are you, Julianne? I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing well. And thank you for coming back on the show, because, we had a great conversation on an earlier episode in the series, but I was very interested in a chapter that you have in your book, which I hope you'll show the cover and tell everybody about it.
Sure.
But I was saying before I brought you on that, relationships, it's really what life is about. It's how we enrich our life. It's how we enhance our life. It's how we find joy. However, many of us struggle with ways to have healthy relationships. So you're going to give us some tips today about how we can do that and improve. But first, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Jerry Skolnik. I live in San Marcos, California. But as you can hear in my voice after I say three words, that I am not a native Californian. I am from New York. I lived in New York most of my life. Moved out here to be near my children and my grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren. I have 1 daughter and 1 son, and it's a blast seeing them and being able to, do things with them and just interject all kinds of things. It's a lot of fun.
That is a blessing. So tell us a little bit about your book before we start talking about just one particular chapter on relationships that I'm so interested in.
Sure. I wrote a book during the pandemic. I was in the gas station business for 30 years and the hair salon business for 20 years. And I moved out here in 2016 and the pandemic hit, and I was working for a small distributorship in the hair salon business, where back in New York, I was working for the biggest distributor. And I wasn't really enjoying it. As a matter of fact, I didn't love either the gas station business or the hair salon business. I did very well in both. It was a given that I was going into the gas station business because my dad was one of the biggest guys in the business at the time. And I knew that when I got married and have children, that I would be in a good financial position. So I did that. And during the pandemic, I was laid off from my job, and I got the phone call that we're all going to be laid off. And so, of course, that's what was going to happen. And then I sat back and I said, you know what? Isn't it time I do something for the first time in my life that I love? And that's helping people. So I started doing videos on Facebook. Now I've been doing Instagram and LinkedIn as well. My videos are very short. They're 2 minutes because nobody has any kind of an attention span anymore. And I do them daily. I don't do Sunday and I don't do Christmas, but I do every other day, even other holidays I do. And just different messages, things that I've learned. I was studied under Bob Proctor and Brian Tracy. And from the videos, I decided to write a book because I had so much material. So I wrote this book called We're All Crazy, Get Used to It. And the book is all about positivity, turning your negative beliefs into positive beliefs. The reason I wanted a catchy title is because I had read in one of the most famous books of all time, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, that somebody had written a book, and the book was not selling, and the publisher changed the name of the book. He did not change one single word in the book, and all of a sudden the book sold, and that stuck with me. So I said, you know what? I want to have a name of a book that's catchy. And we are all crazy. I mean, everybody I've ever spoken to about this says it's true. We are all crazy. The world makes us crazy. It's a whole different world today. Yeah. And it's all about negotiating your life and trying to make the best out of it. I mean, there's good and there's bad to everything pretty much. Uh, Hopefully the bad is not too bad, but you could put a positive or a negative spin on just about anything. So why not put a positive spin? I did it, and it's changed my life completely. Every time something comes up, I try to say, what is the good in this? And think about it. You lose your job, a lot of times you gain a better job. You lose a relationship, and we'll talk about that, and you get a better relationship. You never thought it could happen, but it happens. So this is what life's all about.
That's right. I mean, it's sort of that saying where they say you never lose, you just learn. And so that's, I think, the perspective that you offer us. So like I was saying before I brought you on, relationships, I mean, it's one of those things that's so hard. And I think because many of us carry unhealthy patterns from experiences that we have had in our life. And, these relationships, they could either be, our romantic relationships, our marriage relationships, or it could be our platonic relationships, such as friends or coworkers or whatnot. But every relationship matters. However, I have found over time that even with myself, probably mostly with myself, that I have the same patterns in relationships no matter where I am. So where I'm successful in relationships at home, I'm also very successful in relationships at work. But where I'm not, then that sort of carries with me too. So I thought you could give us a few tips on, what are the building blocks of a good relationship?
Well, the first thing that needs to be said here is that we are who we are, and we are what we think about, and we will take into the next relationship the same patterns, as you say, as we had before. There are so many volatile relationships that, you say, I don't get it. You went out with Bill or you went out with Mary and everything was not working out. And now you're with Joe or you're with Beth and it's the same thing. You have to work on yourself first. A lot of the problems, people go from one relationship to the other. And you have to take some time to heal. Even if it was a bad relationship, you need to heal from the past relationship. If you go from one to the next right away, it's a method for disaster. It's what's the word I want? It's a formula. It's a formula for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm very proud of myself because since I've been divorced, whatever relationship that I was in, I never went from one right to the next one. I always took 5 or 6 months to digest what I did wrong, because let's face it, there's a lot of people out there, and that's another thing about relationships. A lot of people out there, they don't think they did anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We have to wake up.
Every relationship has two sides. I mean, there are two people involved. And so even if you thought you were doing everything right, there's always something, maybe that the perception of the other person or how it worked in your communication. So I guess maybe you're not wrong, but maybe that pattern didn't serve you or serve that relationship well.
Well, what I've learned from relationships is that there does not have to be a right or a wrong to anything. Men and take the romantic one, or men and women per se. We all, I lost my train of thought for a second. We think differently.
Mm-hmm.
We just process things differently. We think differently. And you have to understand, one of my favorite things I always say is my dad used to come over to me and I would say, your mother this, your mother that. And even when I was at a young age, I would say, Dad, you don't get it. That's why I think I was born to do this kind of thing and study relationships, because I knew from an early age that we're just very different and we think things through differently. And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to be with somebody, whether it's a relationship between man and woman or men and men, it really doesn't matter. You don't want to be with somebody who's exactly the same as you. You want to learn and grow with other people, because that's really when you are going to grow and change. And we all need to change when we get into a relationship, not drastically, but a little bit. And it's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with people having their own opinions. And it's all, you could go back to the beginning. It's all how we were brought up. I mean, let's face it, we were brought up with certain values. Our parents taught us all kinds of things. I've always said that I still believe to this day that, maybe not to this day, but for the most part, we believed our parents were gods. They're not gods. They're just people. They're people like anybody else. But be it right or be it wrong, when you're a little child, your parents are there to keep you safe, and they are there to make sure everything's okay. And you can't make decisions when you're 5, 6 years old. It just doesn't, it's not happening. And what we learn from our parents continues on. And then, of course, you can go back and say, well, your mother grew up in a certain way, your father grew up in a certain way. I mean, for me personally, if anybody out there has seen the movie The Greek Wedding, my father's family was her family. And my mother's family was her family. I mean, my father's family, huggy and kissy and screaming and carrying on, the good, the bad, all these things. I could go on forever about my father's family. My mother's family was more quiet. And so, I mean, that's what I learned. But then you get to a point where you're a little older and you say, you know what, it's time to make your own decisions and just, do the best you can. I mean, I lost a brother who never got over, I used to tell him, mom and dad are gone. They can't hurt you anymore. Not that they were bad. My parents were not bad people at all, not in the least. He got mixed messages, the wrong messages. And, but I learned a long time, you can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. So, but I don't want to go off into that tangent. So,
all right. So let's talk about this. So we know, you said, first of all, there doesn't have to be a right and wrong.
Absolutely.
Number 2 is that you have to make a choice, and that that there are 2 sides to every relationship. So that's what I've heard from you so far. Now, if I wanted to change one of my relationship patterns, what would be the best suggestion that you might have? So, for instance, if I'm a person who, when I feel threatened or upset, I shut down, how do I improve my communication so that when I'm talking to my spouse or someone at work or my child, that I can move out of that need or pattern of just going internal and finding a way to then deal with what's at hand?
Well, the 3 things that I would come up with immediately are, we all have best friends that listen to us. We all have different kinds of friends. You want some friends that'll just yes you to death. You want friends that'll put you up against the wall, so to speak. I don't mean literally. And they'll tell you what they really think. So that's one way. Reading certain books. If you're having problems with certain things, go online, look for what it is that you have the problem with, go to the bookstore and get a book about it, and be open-minded, though. That is so important. Be open-minded, because if you're not open-minded, you're not going to change. And you can't constantly think, I'm right. It doesn't work that way. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I don't care who you are. We all make mistakes. So reading, and of course, therapy, but you have to find the right therapist who's really going to help you. And, therapy is a whole different ballgame altogether. They're just supposed to listen, and you're supposed to figure it all out yourself. They're supposed to help you figure it out. I've been to therapy. It's good, but it gets to a point where you have to know for yourself when it's over. You can't. Some people go to therapy for 30 years. I mean, I don't see that. It doesn't make any sense to me. You deal with your problem. You have to be able to deal with your problem and go from there. So those are the 3 things that I would think of off the top of my head from your question that I would go about. But more importantly, you have to know that I need to change this. I am not comfortable with the way I'm operating with this problem. So, a best friend, reading, therapy, those are the three things that would come to my mind immediately from your question.
Great. And I think you're right. First of all, just identifying that we want something different. And then I like the idea of spending some time learning about what it is that could be causing the relationship pattern that we're engaging in so that we can get some strategies. And I know for me that I am a person that tends to, if I get quiet, it's a problem because I talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. That's why we're in a talk show. But the reality is if I stop talking, I know there's an issue. And as time has gone by, what I've realized is I have a right to appropriately communicate how I feel. It's not a one-sided type of thing. And I have built more confidence to be able to find the words to express my feelings. That's really hard, I think, for some of us. And I had great parents. I mean, my parents were married until my dad passed away almost 5 years ago. And, there's never a perfect marriage, but we had a really nice growing up. But even then, I felt kind of shy when I would want to talk about my feelings. And so I think coming to a point where I feel like, hey, you know what? It does matter how I feel. And I do have a right to communicate that, but you can still do it in a way that is respectful to you and the person that you're trying to solve whatever issue you have with, correct?
There's no question about that. And I believe if you want to say one word that is the key to a really great relationship, it's communication.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be willing to communicate. You have to be willing to listen to how the other person feels and understand that they're not you.
Mm-hmm.
We are all unique. Every single one of us is unique. And one of the things that bothers me is when somebody says, well, I can't do this. He's great at that. She's great at this. What about what you're great at? We're all great at something better than most other people. But we seem to think of all these people that are better than us. And again, when it comes to communication, I mean, there's all stages in a relationship, let's face it. When you meet, the first thing when you meet somebody is the chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Have chemistry with this person. If you have chemistry with this person, you probably will get involved with them, but the physicality happens. And then, and there's always a honeymoon period. I truly believe this. Mm-hmm. 6, 8 months, 9 months is a honeymoon period. Everybody's on their best behavior. Everybody's on their best behavior. And then all of a sudden, the real you comes out. And that's not a bad thing. No. But you let your guard down. And now can you be with this person going forward?
Right.
And if you can, you can. If you can't, you can't. I get it. But there's no perfect relationship. There's no perfect person. Nothing is perfect. And I've said this before, that if you were perfect, you would love it for a while, maybe for a couple of months. And guess what would happen after that? Life will become boring. You would look for problems. I know it sounds crazy, but if you really think it through, I mean, here's an example. Maybe it's a poor analogy, but it's an analogy nevertheless. Las Vegas. And I know now they have push buttons instead of the handles and all that kind of thing, but
I like the handles better myself.
So we all did. I think we all did. Here's what I'm going to say. If every single time you push that button or pull the handle, every single solitary time you won, it would be fantastic for a while. But after you won a few $1 million or whatever, it would be a job. Mm-hmm. It would become a job.
Well, so So, I have a psychology degree, so I'm a pop psychologist. I'm not, PhD by any means or even master's prepared in that area. My master's is in weird things like epidemiology because I find that fascinating. With that said, you talked about moving from romantic to companionate love. And you're right. That's what happens is, that honeymoon period is that romantic love. And then you go to that companionate love, which is really when you're starting to rely on the sort of the personality and the values and all of those things that really cement the relationship. And that is sort of where the rubber meets the road, because the reality is that we can only be in that crazy romantic feeling for so long because quite frankly we probably wouldn't even get anything done if we stayed in that forever because we'd be so busy being in love, right?
Exactly. Yeah. In the very first sentence of my paragraph on my chapter on relationships, I cite a couple that I knew back in New York. I think they were geniuses at what they did. Once a month, they had children. They were married. Once a month, it didn't have to be the same day. It could be a Thursday, a Saturday, whatever. They would go to a hotel. They'd leave the house, go to a hotel. And if you think about that, we should all do that
Yeah.
because you have children. A lot of us have children, and it like just sucks the life out of you sometimes. And then things start to go wrong, and then the physicality will diminish, and it'll be a whole different thing. So that's one of the things I cite in my chapter on relationships. But relationships is like anything else in life. Another thing I like to say, it's maybe a silly thing, but there are many times, this is going to sound really crazy, but there are many times where if I could, I'd punch myself out. Yeah, because I'm so angry at myself or I did something stupid or
Uh-huh.
whatever. So think about it. Now you're upset with yourself. You can get upset with yourself so easily. Now you're with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I also mentioned that a lot of times what happens in relationships, and it's sad to say, but I'm aware of this now from all the studying that I've done, is when, let's say, take a married couple, the husband or the wife or the significant, I rather say significant other, loses their job or something bad, or they get sick or whatever it may be. They come home every day and they're going through this and they're seeing the same face. And all of a sudden, when they see this face of the other person who has nothing to do with, what happened, loss of a job or a sickness or whatever, they look at this other person and now it's become linked up.
Mm.
Every time you see this person, you automatically come in a bad mood and you don't even know why.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the things that I've learned in doing this studying over the past 3 to 5 years. And if we were all aware of this, we wouldn't do it.
So thinking about that, because my husband passed away. I was married for a little bit. I was with him for 22 years. And yeah, no matter what life that begins to insert itself into your relationship, right? Whether it be, like you said, you're sick or you lose a job, things happen in our life. It's inevitable. No one
No,
gets away from this
no,
life
no,
without,
no,
without troubles, right?
nobody.
So with that said, as you're thinking about what if you're the person that has, I kind of like to explore the roles of those things. So if I'm the person that's lost my job, I'm vulnerable. I'm, maybe depressed. I'm going through it. I'm maybe grieving the loss of my job. Me thinking about that sort of energy exchange or my effect on my significant other, I don't know if I'd be thinking of that. And then if I'm the other person, I do know that you do get a little bit, you can get a little peeved by someone always being down in the dumps and feeling like they're sort of a buzzkill for you. What do you do in those cases? How do you deal with it on both sides? What do you do if you're the person who's experiencing the life change? And then what do you do when you're the person who is trying to support that person?
The vulnerable person
Mhm.
needs to know that they need somebody to lean on. They have to, again, communication's the same thing. That person has to be able to say, honey, I don't know what to do. I'm just at a loss for words. I'm this, I'm that. I need your help. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, especially men, have trouble asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, the person who's not in this situation has to be able to recognize that the other person is struggling and needs to help them, and to be able to say to them, look, I don't want, we need to, and by the way, give somebody their space at first. I mean, you can't jump on them immediately and say, but, wait a couple of days or whatever, and then all of a sudden, listen, we can get through this. We can do this. We have to work together. But so many of, I would never have known this either unless I did all the studying about it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, but that's what needs to be done. It's really, it's communication. Like I said before, it's all about communication. And one other point I wanted to make, as far as, when nobody can escape certain things, what are the odds of you starting a business and nothing going wrong?
Dear bro, the odds are there 100%. Whatever it is, it's gonna happen.
I agree with you. I think nothing's 100%, but 99.8. Who starts a business and something doesn't go wrong and they flip out? I mean, when I was back in New York working for the big distributor, my manager, every little thing that I felt bad for the guy, I really did. Every single thing that went wrong, the smallest thing was like the end of the world. These things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. You have to smile through it. And look, I'm smiling. That's a key thing also in relationships and in life in and of itself. When you smile, can you feel bad?
It is hard to feel bad when you smile.
It's also hard to feel bad when you use good words.
True.
It's hard to feel good when you use bad words. You have to watch your vocabulary. It's so important. I took a word out of my vocabulary less than a year ago, and I wish I had taken it away 30 years ago. And that word is hate. When you hate, I truly believe this. People could disagree with me, and that's fine. When you hate, you're only hurting yourself and nobody else.
I think when you hate, you give all your power to somebody else.
And it's getting you sick inside.
Yes.
And half the times, if not more than half the times, the person you hate, if it's a person, they don't even know that you hate them. Mm-hmm. You can hate your boss for letting you go, whatever it is. I had a situation, I don't want to dwell on it, but I moved to Orange County for a little while because I got this great job and I had all of Orange County. So it was silly for me not to move there. A month and a half into the job, I was laid off. If I had not done this studying, I'd probably still be sitting in the corner in a fetal position.
Right.
Because of the studying that I've done, I look at that time in Orange County and even meet anybody. I didn't have any friends, but I loved my time there. I enjoyed really good food. I loved where I lived. If you walked outside, you felt like you were at a resort. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. So I take away from that only good feelings and good thoughts. Right. Never would have been able to do that if I didn't do this studying. You have to take again, what did I say before? You have to take, it could be a good and a bad to or positive or negative to everything. And that's what my book is all about. It's turning your negative beliefs into positive. And it's all about positivity. Take everything that happens to you and look at the positive side of it. Yes, there are things that you cannot put to positive. I get that. And I want to mention that because I don't want anybody to think that's gone through something so horrible that you can't put a positive spin. I get it. But for the most part, you can take any negative and turn it into a positive.
Although I will say I've had quite a bit of difficulty in my life on and off. And I can look at most everything. And while I would love it to be different, so, I would like the situation to have been different, I still can find something that enriched me as a person. Again, you never lose, you learn. And that's some very tough stuff that I've gone through, I believe. Now, I think people have been through much worse things than I have in their lives as well. So, and I can't dictate what anybody feels. However, I have also chosen to take those as to understand that I can still grieve and feel sad about the situation, but there's something that I learned from it. I'm losing my husband to suicide. Um, I am a much more compassionate person now. I thought I was nice before, but the level of compassion that I feel now is much, much different. And I would have not been able to be that person if I would have not had that loss. Nothing wrong with the person I was before, but it's definitely, there's an enrichment there, which hopefully takes me to live more of my purpose.
Julianne, just the mere fact that you can mention something like that is so cathartic, so to speak. And to just dismiss something like what happened to you, it was his fault or whatever, and whatever, I don't care, whatever it may have been. People do that, and that's really sad, and it's really damaging to the person to just dismiss something like that and just go on with your life and never ever what's the word I want, attack it or own up to it. If something bad happens to you, you have to face it eventually. And when I say that, that doesn't mean the same day. That doesn't mean a month from now. It could be a year, but eventually you have to face it. Or don't face it. But if you don't face it, it's going to impede your progress and it's going to hurt you in the long run.
Yeah. And then importantly, like we were talking about today, I mean, the richness of our life comes from the relationships that we have, our spouses or significant others, our children, if we have them, our extended family, our parents, our friends, our coworkers. And if we don't find a way to analyze our thinking, then we will not be able to give all that we have to offer.
Couldn't have said it better. That's excellent. You're right. You're 100% right. Yeah.
All right. So, Jerry, I have to end every episode with a question, and that is, how did you step into your life?
Well, I believe I stepped into my life again, I have to preface this. I do this on my videos all the time. If I feel like I've offended anybody, I'll say right on the video, even though it's less than 2 minutes, I'll say right away. I did one on being perfect, and I said, I don't think any of us are perfect, but if you think you're perfect, that's fine. I just think most of us would feel that we're not. So I believe I stepped into my life from COVID. And I don't want to make light of how bad COVID was and how terrible it is, but I think somehow or some way I started saying things like, how can I turn this around? What can I do to make this a little better for me and maybe for everyone? And so I stepped into my life when COVID hit because I realized I was in the gas station business, did not love it. Did very well in it, didn't love it. I was in the hair salon business, did very well in it, didn't love it. But I love what I'm doing now. And that's so important because I've always said, when you do something for a living that you love, you have the world. So I know it sounds crazy to have come into to have stepped into my life only a few years ago, but I just feel so much better knowing that I'm doing things to help people.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing. And a couple of more tips that Jerry has before we close, just to remember is everyone has a right to their own opinion. There's no right or wrong in anything. Be kind to yourself.
Oh, big, very important.
And there will be good days, bad days, and rough times, but we can get through it. So thank you for giving us your wisdom today. Anyone, how can people get your book?
It's on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. Another thing I did with this book, which I'm pretty proud of, when the publisher sent me back my manuscript, he said he would take care of the chapters. He sent it back to me with no chapters. And I called the guy up and I said, very nicely, because I'm not a nasty or mean person. I kind of wanted to be in this, but I didn't. I just said, listen, there isn't a person on earth that's going to read a book with no chapters. I don't think so. Because you know what that is, Julianne? That's a run-on sentence.
Yes.
So I said, I'll take care of the chapters myself. But I turned a negative into positive. You know what I did? I said, okay, I'm going to make more chapters than he would have even made. So I have a 116-page book with 43 chapters.
Woo!
And the reason I did that is because I know when people are reading a book at night, they're going to look for the next chapter, how many pages it is. And if it's 30 or 40 pages, I can't read this now, put it down. They may pick it up tomorrow. They may not pick it up for months. Who knows? In my book, there is no chapter that's more than 3 pages.
So it's all bite-sized pieces.
Bite-sized pieces. I have, like I said, 43 chapters in a 116-page book. You can read it in 2 sittings or 3 or 4 if you want. But also, very important, my book is not complicated and is not controversial in either of those ways in any way at all. Just good tips that I've learned through the studying with Bob Proctor, through the studying of Brian Tracy. And by the way, Brian Tracy wrote a testimonial to my book on the back page.
Very nice.
And he's written 90 books.
Wow.
People don't, everybody knows Anthony Robbins, Tony Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows Tony Robbins, but very few people know any of the other big guys in the business. And Bob Proctor, who just passed away about a year or so ago, and Brian Tracy, who's still around, they are probably number 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. 2 and 3. If they're not, they're in the top 5.
Yes.
So anyway, so my book is on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. I think it's $11 or something like that. And I think you do well to read it because and I'm not being conceited about it. It's just that I've learned all these things in the past 3 to 5 years. And I put it in book form. That's all. So I want to help as many people as I can. So I'm hoping that the book will do that for everyone.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us today. And I hope you'll come back on the show and we can talk about another one of your chapters because I know you have so many different things in the book. And everyone who is with us today, thank you for watching. And it's such a privilege to have you watch Step Into Your Life. So let's go ahead and continue to journey together.